With Renee Porter. She is an ed navigator and helping with Lindsey Nicole Henry help with lnhhelp.org, just to make sure that parents are up to date on the Lindsey Nicole Henry Scholarship, the program, the ins and outs. So can you give us a little bit of a background on the program? What is it? Yeah, how do people use it? What
Absolutely.
parents qualify?
Sure thing. Since 2010, the Lindsey Nicole Henry Scholarship has been state law in Oklahoma. I would argue perhaps that this is one of the most transformational educational programs in Oklahoma and one of the least well known. The Henry Scholarship is Oklahoma's voucher program. We are one of only 16 states, the District of Columbia and Puerto Rico, to have a voucher program. So very unique for Oklahoma. The Lindsey Nicole Henry Scholarship Program is specifically designed to help to create opportunities for vulnerable Oklahoma kids. So you say, who is vulnerable? Who's defined as a vulnerable child in Oklahoma by the Henry Scholarship? And there are 7 eligibility categories today that students can qualify for or be eligible to make application to become a Henry Scholar. So what are those? First and foremost is students with special needs or disabilities. That's defined through an IEP. So if a student has an IEP, and they have attended a public school the year prior, they're going to be eligible to apply. In addition, a student who has an IEP whose family is military, who have relocated here to Oklahoma, who are new to our state through an official change of station order, those families who come here who are now Oklahomans, and their student again has an IEP, they can benefit from the Henry Scholarship as well. So either they've come here from out of country or out of state. In addition, really profound is thinking about our foster care community and our kids who are in state custody. So 2 categories under our foster care kiddos. The first one is going to be students who have been adopted out of foster care and they found their forever homes. And then moreover is going to be students who, young people who are still in and out of home placement through foster care. They both will qualify for the Henry Scholarship and are eligible to make application. 2 other categories that exist are Sooner Start, which is a state program that allows for education. They identify students who have special needs or disabilities, but when they're very youngest, so birth to 3. So these are our very youngest Oklahomans who need additional support and an opportunity. If a student was served by Sooner Start, deemed eligible for education services on a move forward, they qualify as well. They do need to have an IEP also. And then the last category is going to be kids who are in state custody through the Office of Juvenile Affairs and in and out of home custody arrangement as well. They as well are eligible for the Henry Scholarship. So those are kind of quickly the 7 categories. There's some unique requirements under each of those, but very broadly, just to give an idea of what that looks like, those are the eligibility areas for our kids.
So once an eligible student gets a Lindsey Nicole Henry Scholarship, whether they're in foster care or they have an IEP, how long can they continue to receive that scholarship?
A student can continue per state law. This is what state law says. A student can continue to receive the scholarship with an annual renewal application until one of 3 things happens. Either the student then graduates from high school, they turn 22 years of age, or parent or guardian says that they decide that they want that student to return to a public school. So any of those 3 things. So you think about, for example, a student who receives a Henry Scholarship, particularly very young, for first, second grade, it doesn't matter, but they can continue year after year to receive the benefit of a Henry Scholarship. So
that's a weight off, because
huge.
I would assume that would be a question of a parent, is that you could ever lose a scholarship, or under what circumstances would that look like, and to have that comfort.
And to be real clear, maybe I didn't, because I'm live it every day and work with parents and families every day, but the Henry Scholarship is an education voucher then that allows that parent or guardian to use those scholarship dollars that are determined by the State Department of Education. They do the calculation, but use those dollars then to send that student to an approved private school. And so that's really the mechanisms around how that works. So one of our vulnerable Oklahoma kids receives a scholarship, and then those dollars will go with them to help to underwrite tuition and fees at that school. So
we have heard from a lot of parents where they have felt like there have been gaps, or where the needs of their child, they feel like they can't be completely met in their current environment.
Mm-hmm.
And so this would allow them to attend another school. Are there schools that are especially geared towards kids with special needs, or what do some of those options look like?
I kind of have this smile on my face because I'm thinking about, as I was driving up here to come and do this and sit down and visit with you about this, I was on the phone with a mom who, her son has an IEP, and she said exactly what you just said, which is, she's like, the school isn't meeting those needs. Like, it's not where he needs to be. He's not receiving the education that he should and that he deserves to receive. So she was looking for options, and he's going to qualify. He meets eligibility to make applications, so we're going to work through that this afternoon. But there are 78 approved schools in the state of Oklahoma. 78 schools approved across the state of Oklahoma to serve Henry Scholars. And those schools run the gamut. To your question around private schools across the state of Oklahoma, but amongst those are specialty schools as well, who specifically their mission, the very heart of what they do day in and day out, is serving students with special needs and disabilities, so a specialty school. So if you happen to be, for example, in the Oklahoma City area and you think of Trinity School, or Good Shepherd School here in Oklahoma City that works with students specifically who are on the autism spectrum. That is their whole mission. That's all they do. And then up in Tulsa, for example, think of Town and Country School. So it runs the gamut. And some of our special or private schools as well, St. John's up in Bartlesville, they have certified staff who work with students who have dyslexia. So there's a lot of different ways. That's where parents really need to begin to foray into and to begin to explore the kind of marketplace of education options that are available to them, to see what's out there, and to learn more about those schools. And the best way to do that is to begin to go and visit those schools. And now is an ideal time as well to go and visit. There's so many open houses and virtual open houses and meet and greets and things like that. This is admission season for our private schools. So a really great time to get in there and begin to, you need to, as a parent or guardian, go and look at that school and go and see what they have to offer and see if it's a good fit. That's the bottom line. You need to see if it's going to be a good fit for your student.
Absolutely. So you mentioned the school in Bartlesville.
Yeah.
It makes me think of the geography. I mean, are most of these schools in the metro areas, or are they all over Oklahoma?
Perhaps one of the most fascinating things in the work that when I started digging into this was really to look at that landscape and see where the schools are. There's, you look at 78 schools, about a third of them are in Oklahoma City. About a third are in Tulsa, and then everything else is outside of that. And when I say Oklahoma City, I mean like they have an Oklahoma City address, not Yukon or Norman or, something outside of that metroplex or that specific city. So it really runs the gamut. I mean, there are offerings all over the state. There's a school that's approved in Miami, in Claremore, in Ponca, in Enid, in Hillsdale, Corona, Oklahoma. I mean, these are, some of our rural communities where people they hear about this and they think, well, there's probably not a school for me, and there very well may be. So
that's amazing. Yeah. Because it sounds proportional to the population.
Yeah.
I guess I think the assumption would be that, well, they're just mostly in the metro areas, but
correct.
To have that many rural schools is amazing.
Yeah. And the list is growing. Just for example, the State Department of Education is the entity that approves schools to be Henry serving schools. And they approved during their December meeting 5 more schools. Thinking about the growth of the number of schools then that offer parents and guardians more options. There's more schools for them to look at. There's more schools for them to explore, to see how their student can find a school that's going to be a best fit for them.
And it's amazing because it also shows the desire for schools to serve, at-risk populations or underserved populations. And it's just amazing that so many more schools are signing on.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
I hear from school leaders very frequently who are interested in that. So that's part of the work that I do as well, is work with school leaders. Sometimes I talk to parents and they'll say, the school that I'm interested isn't on the list. So, what do I do, or how do I go about that? And same thing, like with anything, I'm like, well, you please approach them and let them know that your child would potentially be a Henry Scholar, that you're very interested in having them attend that school. And I similarly will follow up and let them know what the application process looks like for a school as well. So,
nice. So parents leading the way.
exactly how it should be, right?
Concept.
Yes. So I'm like, you advocate and I'll do my part on my end, and then go and visit. I have a school visit coming up on Thursday with a school in Norman. That's exactly how it came to pass. I had a mom contact me, and her child's going there. He was adopted out of foster care, and she's very interested. She said it's an amazing fit for him, and he is just thriving, and she could not be more thrilled to have found this school, but it's not yet on the approved list. So hopefully we'll be able to work with them to make application to get there as well.
So speaking of parents, what are the most asked questions that you get from parents when they're seeking help?
Oh, probably the number one question is around the amount of the scholarship, I think, which is a really tough one. Yeah. I mean, I'm like, how much is this worth? You start to think about what perhaps you even like your preconceived ideas about what you think private school costs. My own experience, having been a private school parent, pre-K 8 for us was, had a certain amount, and then it goes up exponentially at high school. Those do grow in terms of scholarship amounts, but the amount of the scholarship is number one. My reply to that, I have no idea, because every kiddo is different. Yeah. And for example, again, I think I said this earlier, but the State Department of Education calculates all of those scholarship amounts, and they're going to vary. And they're going to vary because how the eligibility application, what box they're going to check that they're actually applying. So for example, if a family is making an application for their child, and they're applying to say, my student has special needs and disabilities defined through an IEP, and they check that box, the State Department of Education takes into account both the grade and the weight of that disability in calculating the amount of that scholarship. So if a student has one disability, then that's a multiplier. But if they have multiple disabilities that are defined in their formal paperwork through that IEP and their MEAGs, then the amount can go up exponentially. So it varies. But I say all of that to back into state law, because that's our foundational piece, right? This state law that exists. And state law will also says that at the end of the day, the scholarship will be one of two things: the lesser of state and local funding for that child, or the tuition and fees at the private school that they've selected. Yeah. So
it can never exceed the tuition amount. And for Oklahoma, I believe our average tuition, especially in the primary grade levels, elementary and middle school, are right around $6,000.
Yeah.
I think for high school, it's a little bit over $7,000.
Correct.
And so the average amount again was
the average amount for the Henry Scholarship. The last we were able to calculate, which was the 2019-2020 school year, looking at all of the scholarships awarded and the amounts of funding that was associated with that, was slightly over $7,000. So that's an average for all of those scholarships that were awarded that year.
That's significant.
It's huge.
Yeah,
it's huge. It really is.
We've been able to speak to some of the parents that have access some of these different options for education, and the stories of the transformation of their children, how they're now thriving. We had a grandmother that talked to us about her grandson that was so anxious in school, just because of the large class size and kind of a lot of things going on around him. And he would chew through his shirt and through his pen and his binders. But now that he's in a different environment that really caters to his needs, it's just academically has gone through the roof. And it's just, she cries every time she tells the story, because it's just so amazing.
Yeah.
I'm sure you've heard many of these kinds of stories as well. And
I have. Absolutely. There's a lot of stories. The one that I have to say has been like, perhaps that one for me that, is so profound is I was contacted actually by a pastor, by a faith leader, who had shared a story with me and asked about the Henry Scholarship, because they have somebody in their faith community who they were walking alongside, because this man had lost his wife. She had passed away, had passed away. and part of the information that I came to learn later was he and his wife had been fostering. They had 6 kids that they were fostering, siblings, and trying to keep this lovely group of young people together and really doing what they can. And they were in that foster care, out of home placement, when they learned that she had a diagnosis. That was a very dire diagnosis. The doctors had said to them, you need to focus on your healing and send these kids back to, send them back to foster care. You really need to, you guys as a couple need to really focus on this. Rather than doing that, they adopted all 6 kids.
Yeah.
She very sadly and tragically lost her battle with cancer. However, one of her wishes was that the kids would find their way to this faith-based school that is associated with the church where this pastor and faith leader had contacted. And all 6 kids made application, and all 6 today are Henry Scholars. So yeah, it's amazing. It's amazing.
Super amazing.
Yeah. Yeah.
Oh, and so there were siblings as well?
That's my understanding. Yeah, there were some siblings in there, and working to keep kids together and keep that family together, which is transformational.
What an amazing
for
story.
them. Yeah, it's remarkable.
So are there any categories of vulnerable students that aren't included within the current program?
Yes. I mean, I can tell you that I get contacted and asked about, my student has, or my child has, for example, a 504 plan. A 504, if you don't have it, is different federal legislation from what creates and defines an IEP. 504s are civil rights under civil rights law. So this is about like accommodations and things like that. Same spirit of the law in terms of helping to support a vulnerable kiddo educationally, but it is not defined through an IEP. So a kiddo who's on a 504 plan does not today qualify for the Henry Scholarship. That's not included in state law. Another category is you think about kinship placements. These are family members, oftentimes grandparents is my experience, who contacts me, and they'll say, I took in my grandchild, or I took in my niece or nephew to keep them out of foster care. So they're stepping in to do the right thing, to keep that child out of state custody, and yet that doesn't meet currently very specific, law and statute that we have here in Oklahoma. So kinship placements is another area as well that I would say it aligns, beautifully.
Like that would be the intention, especially with the inclusion of foster care children.
Exactly.
Adopted out of
exactly. And these families who are stepping up to make sure that kids, we've already got an overburdened foster care system, and then you think about another child going into that, and the opportunity for that kiddo to be able to stay with family, to be able to have that opportunity. But
because kinship placements don't actually receive any support from the state, or
So that's my understanding.
So these grandparents are, by stepping up and doing what they feel is right, they're actually also saving the state tons of
that's
dollars
my understanding.
As well.
Yeah.
Oh, it'd be a blessing for them to access this scholarship as well.
Yes, exactly.
No, that would be amazing. So if a parent's looking to connect and wants to get help accessing this program, how do they contact you? And maybe talk to us a little bit about the process of walking them through the application with the State Department of Education.
So, for example, I mentioned that I had, mom contacted me this morning, just to let you know, this is how she went about it. We have a Facebook page, the Lindsey Nicole Henry Scholarship. So you can go out and search for that Facebook page. She sent me a message. She sent me a direct message to the Facebook page. Then I also received from her, we have a website, which is LNH for Lindsey Nicole Henry, lnhhelp.org. And we have a form on there that if you want more information, or, I follow back up with those. So I received an email message from her as well through our website. There was a Facebook message. And then, we have a phone number as well, of course, that people can call, which is 405-294-6992. 405-294-6992. And then my email. Anybody can just, of course, directly email as well. That's all on our website, but it's Renee, Renee, @lnhhelp.org. untitled.org. So, I mean, there's, lots of ways, like always, to get a hold of folks and to connect. And so any of those, I get them all, and am happy to reach out and respond and let families know exactly what the step-by-step process is. It's really my hope as well is that families are also submitting complete applications to the State Department of Education, and that helps them to, process those and vet and review those, that they've got everything that's coming in and everything that's required for them as well. So,
well, thank you for everything that you're doing to help these parents and these families, as well as these schools as well. And, just great work. Absolutely great work.
Well, thank you. And thank you for the opportunity to visit about the Henry Scholarship. And one of the things, this was my final word to Mom this morning as well, was what we really need is, this is a program that has existed now for 11 years. The last numbers that I saw from a couple years ago that were officially published there were only 996 students benefiting from the Henry Scholarship. Our estimates are, thinking about all of these different eligibility categories, there are over 100,000 kids who would qualify for the Henry Scholarship. So there's a lot of people who can benefit from this state law who are not today. And so what I always ask is, and I'm asking her on the phone, I was like, think about who you know. Think about who you know at work. Who are your neighbors? Who do you know that you've had that conversation with, where you've been talking about, particularly this year and last year, what your education, what it looks like, what are your struggles? What are the challenges that your kids and my kids are dealing with right now? And what are you doing in facing that? And at some point somebody says, well, it's hard enough. And then my kiddo has an IEP. My kiddo has a special need or disability. So reflect on, if you would, that, and I'm asking folks if they would reflect on, those conversations, and think about who you know. Who do you know within your, the foster care community is amazing in terms of their network and sharing information and passing.
A lot of parents don't even know that this support is out there.
Exactly. So if they will share this information as well to help to create and increase awareness, it's going to be even more profound and help more kids across Oklahoma who need the help, our vulnerable Oklahoma kiddos.
Awesome. Well, thank you for being with us here today.
Thank you.
Spending a little bit of time while we celebrate School Choice.
Yeah.
And hopefully we'll see you again really soon.
Awesome. Happy School Choice Week.
Thank you.